Earthlings, welcome to another show. I'm in a bit of chaos here, but we shall persevere. My sick cat has just fallen off the window ledge, so we'll see what happens for the next hour or so. So, how are you doing, Ronnie?
I'm all right. Yeah, keeping going. Still alive.
Keeping going.
Yes.
So you are still alive, are you?
I am still alive. Yes.
All
yes.
right. In that case, I can play this then. Yeah, for those concerned about Ruja, the cat, I've put her on the bed and covered her over the blanket, so she seems okay. Right, so we had a very early entry from Graham, I think, just in order to beat Michael. That's the main thing. I think.
They'll be joining the next one as soon as this one's over, won't they?
Yeah, they probably will be. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, which is. Yeah. And then we got Terry, and so Michael, you were relegated to the bronze position, although it's said that we're still alive, and that is correct. So, and we've got
yes,
Justin, hello there.
That's it. Yeah. Although I have been tired the last couple of days because I went to London on Sunday. I was speaking at the We Stand for the Animals event, and it always knackers me.
I wanted to ask about that.
Yeah.
Because I'm not looking forward to the recording of your thing, but I'm looking forward to Wendy's recording. So
yes. So, yeah. Wendy's speech was excellent. There were 2 or 3 like really excellent speeches there.
And yours.
Well, mine was my usual speech. Really, I might as well just do the same speech and just have a recording of it. Save me bothering to stand up.
Maybe we could get a hologram of you just giving it. You know?
Yeah, hologram. Yeah, just save me. Yeah,
Princess Leia and Ronnie Lee.
I can say yes. Stay sitting down, but yeah, I mean, it was good to see everyone. But I always find London really, really tiring. I don't like it at all. And it's
too big and too many people.
Yeah,
but was it well attended?
Yeah, it was pretty well attended. Yes, yeah. It was a positive event.
Right.
And we're worth going to do a speech and meet the other people, listen to them as well. So, I mean, hopefully the speeches will be online soon because
that was the question I was going to ask. When will we see them? I suppose, but
well, hopefully fairly soon. Just depends on how long it takes for the official video to come out.
So you don't feel energized by London then? It
not at all. No. I used to live there. I mean, obviously not in the centre of London, and used to live there for quite a few years, and sort of cope with it all right. But now I just think that. I don't think big cities like that are natural for us. No. What's natural for us is woodland, is forest, really, trees. And so to be in a landscape where there's all these,
If you want me to be honest, Ronnie, I can't see you swinging through trees either.
No, not at my age. No, but I could happily sit underneath one having a cup of tea.
I'll be sitting underneath one with a cup of tea.
Yeah, with a cup of tea. Yeah, but like all the big buildings, big tall buildings and traffic and like loads of people around. I just found it really saps my energy.
Yeah,
especially these days.
Really funny. I was the last time I did the beach clean. I was saying to Veganic Brannick, who I do the beach cleaning with, that when we moved from Liverpool to North Wales. It was amazing because we just stood one day just looking at the sky and we could go around, 360 degrees and we could just see miles and miles and miles of sky. Whereas in a big city, you can't do that very much, right? Because
of the light pollution. The light pollution is really bad. And it's not good for other animals at all. They're disturbed by light. as well. People don't often think of that. I think, obviously they're disturbed by sound and stuff, but light pollution's not a good thing for other animals either.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting one in terms of fireworks, isn't it? Because people think of the sound of them rather than the flashes and stuff, right?
Yeah,
I suppose both of them are a bit.
Yeah, it's both. It's both, to be honest. I
Yeah.
mean, just it's just kind of just appalling that we get. Well, it's not just once a year, is it? It's like really quite often.
Oh, anything now, and also, I mean, what was it? They made a big fuss about Elton John's last gig at Glastonbury, and there must have been 1,000 quid worth of fireworks that were set off.
It's just
I
mean, to me,
that's right. That's a dairy farm, that place, isn't it?
It's and like, I don't know why people want to go to Glastonbury. To me, it would be pretty much my worst nightmare, or getting close to my worst nightmare, to be at Glastonbury for a number of reasons. To be honest, quite apart from supporting a dairy farmer who also
we used to go when you were able to break in.
I mean, it could be argued if people went there with the intention of promoting veganism, and that was their idea. I mean, it could be argued that, like, you could do a like utilitarian argument that it was, on the balance, it was a good thing for them to go.
Yeah.
But like, I think if people aren't doing that, no, it's not.
No,
good.
when they started putting the fences up, right? Bill Bailey, the comedian who used to go sabbing, right? He tells a story that they started to dig these tunnels underneath the fencing that they put up, and the tunnels came out a one-person tent. And he said he was stood there once, kind of, with a bit of a spliff, and he was watching this kind of, somebody come out of this one-person tent, and then somebody else came out, and then somebody else came out, and he was going, "Oh, this isn't right, man. This just isn't right."
It's like a TARDIS tent.
Probably is. Let me just say to everyone that feel free to comment, folks. We won't charge you to get your views on screen. So don't worry about that. And let's go back. There's been a lot of chat while we've been chatting. So let's just see if there's anything we need to address before we start. Somebody said, Roger. Yeah, Linda. What did I say something? I don't know what. Andy doesn't like London either. So that's but somebody's agreeing with you. Oh, Jennifer's agreeing with you. Light pollution sucks. Yeah, everybody's agreeing with you about the fireworks and about the big cities, I think, mainly. So okay, so this is the second of our kind of news-based programs, really. I mean, how do we even describe this this show?
Well, it's a news show, isn't it? It's just commenting on interesting items of recent news.
Give us something to do the old rabbit about, really, isn't it? That's all it is.
But we've got a
that is a problem. That is a problem. If people don't pay, how on earth are we going to be able to monitor the chat? It's just impossible, really, isn't it? So
yeah. But we start off today with a controversial item to do with MBR Acres. MBR Acres, the facility that breeds beagles for supply to laboratories, situated in Cambridgeshire. There's been a camp outside there they just celebrated last weekend the second anniversary of the camp there, second anniversary of Camp Beagle. And there's been a lot of controversy, in different ways, kind of surrounding the camp and the general campaign against MBR Acres. But something's now arisen that is perhaps more controversial than anything.
We're skating on thin ice on this one, I think, Ronnie. Also, there's this. Do you want to deal with this now, or should we come back to it? Roger and Ronnie, do you get a lot of pushback during street activism? I got a lot with a sign, things like "I'm an idiot" and the typical "bacon though" comments. A lot of people say one word, and run away. Well, that last bit is definitely true. But do you want to deal with this now? I'll come back to it, shall we? Or what do you want to do?
I'll deal with it quickly now.
Okay.
My view is that isn't such a problem these days as it used to be. But I think the thing is to kind of, the reason people give those one-liners is that they're probably not capable of having a rational discussion, and kind of usually the word bacon is shouted. We did have one guy shout B12 and then kind of scuttled off.
Yeah.
But I think the thing is you just ignore those people and kind of don't be upset by them. You'll always get people like that. What we're aiming for is big numbers. I don't think we're ever going to kind of educate everyone to go vegan, but then we don't need to. We only have to educate what I'd call a substantial minority in order to kind of, to change things in our favour. So don't let those people trouble you. Concentrate on the people that are interested, the people who do want to have a conversation, and kind of block the negative ones, block the negatives ones out. And also, it's not worth spending time on someone who's just being deliberately
well, as you said, though, you don't even get the chance of that because
you don't even often get the chance. I mean, it's really funny because it isn't just to do with veganism. I was helping at a local street collection last year for Animals Asia, who have got sanctuaries for animals out in Vietnam and China. They mainly rescue the moon bears, who are used for they're kept in cages for the gall, for the bile from their gallbladders and that. Yeah. And I was doing a collection for them, and some bloke rode past on his bike and he shouted out, what about the animals in this country?
All right, okay.
So it's like an animal racist, why are you collecting money for animals in other countries? What about our animals in this country? It's a bit like that. But of course, he rode past very quickly. I didn't have a chance to engage him in conversation.
Well, there is some interesting sociology on this, and I'm sure I've said this before, so forgive me if you've heard this before, folks. But a lot of the times, activists, and this is not just our movement, but other movements, have said that two frequent comments they get is get a life and get a job, right? And that boils down to the fact that people tend to think of protesters as like professional protesters, as though that is their identity and that's kind of what they do, right? And some people, and that's why some people say get a real job, because then people think that you're being paid to do it. And they think, well, if you're not protesting here, you'll be protesting somewhere else. So the ramifications of this are quite significant in the sense that you've got a situation where people think, oh, those are the protesters, those are the demonstrators, i.e. not me. And so I'm not a demonstrator, and so therefore I don't have to take much notice of this. That's one thing that people kind of tend to do. It's like a defense mechanism. They think, should I check this out? Maybe not, because the chances are these people are going to give me information that's going to be upsetting. But on the grounds that I'm not a protester like them, I can safely ignore them. That's the social psychology of what's going on. It's quite interesting in that sense.
But they even say get a job when it's a Sunday afternoon or when it's an evening, as if you're like meant to work 24 hours a day.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. It's always been a common thing. Get a job, I mean, we get a lot of the kind of one-liners, the bacon and all that.
I kind of think the thing about thinking that this almost idea of professional kind of protesters, professional campaigners, I think that can be a problem in the vegan community as well. I think a lot of vegans think the vegans who are activists are kind of, that's almost their job, and that they themselves don't have to do it, if you see what I mean, because that's like our job. So I think that can be, that can be a problem, within vegans as well, But it's best to ignore all these people when they come out with stuff like that, because you get,
I mean, the good ones are the ones who might say, silly things, but then they stop, and then you can talk to them.
Yeah, quite often when they say stuff like that, it's like
it's
they
quite
make
it's
sure
quite frustrating. The other day, somebody walked past us in the street in Dublin, and they said, "Oh, what about the starving people? You know, your priorities are all wrong." And they walked off.
You get that. I've had I had a bus driver shout about why don't you collect money for the children, you see. And of course he's in the bus, but I just what I say to people like that, if I was to have a conversation, so I'd say, well, do you collect money for the children, right? And whatever answer they give, then you've got them, because if they say no, well, then say, well, why are you telling me to when you don't do it? Right. That's the first thing. If they say yes, then what you say is, well, that's brilliant, isn't it? You collect money for the children, I'll collect money for the animals, and then they're both covered. See, so either answer they get, you've got them, really. But they never stayed long enough to have that conversation, I find.
Yeah, we used to get that a lot in Liverpool in the 1980s. You know, kind of you're kind of doing it wrong. You should be looking after the humans first and this kind of stuff. And I used to say, well, yeah, I'm really interested in human issues too. So, you know, have you got a petition? Have you got any leaflets or anything like that? And of course, invariably they go, well, no, I haven't, right? And they say, oh, okay, so you don't do anything, and you're telling me that I'm doing the wrong thing.
Yeah, exactly. That's very true.
Thing.
But we better get on to the
subject, except for this one, Ronnie. I think you might want to. I know we talked about this privately, right?
No, in actual fact, no, they kind of haven't. But basically, for the past 2 years, the National Animal Rights March has been organised by Animal Rebellion, and then all it is that Animal Rebellion's changed into Animal Rising. So they've actually been doing it for the past couple of years, and before that, it was organised by Surge, and I think that maybe Surge didn't want to do it anymore, and Animal Rebellion took it over. So it's kind of, it isn't the case that they've hijacked it. I think there might be other questions to be asked about it, but it's not accurate to say that they've hijacked it.
Okay, that's all right. Right. Okay. Well, let's commence with what we're supposed to be doing then. We're only 17 minutes in.
They're very controversial. Basically, what the controversy is about. There's a woman who's a kind of describes herself as different things, really. A model. I understand she's also been a porn star, or been involved in porn. But she also describes herself as vegan and a vegan restaurant owner, and looking at her Facebook page and everything, it does look like she's genuinely a person who genuinely does care about other animals. But the problem is she's organising a protest against camp outside MBR Acres, which is getting together with other celebrities. So I'm just going to look and see what the post she put up says. I'm organising a bikini protest outside MBR Acres for a big cause. Thanks to the Daily Star for writing about this and what happens at MBR Acres. Thank you in advance to the models and influencers joining me on this big cause. All right. So it's obviously been done to draw attention to what's happening to the beagles at MBR Acres and their eventual fate when they're sent to laboratories. The Daily Star isn't a particularly reputable paper. It's read by people who've got like no more than 2 brain cells. But I think there's questions to be asked about this in a number of ways. I wouldn't at all dispute that she's organising this for genuine reasons, that she just genuinely care about the dogs in there, and genuinely as opposed to what's happening and wants it to end, and thinks that this is a way of of helping that to happen. But I think there are there are problems associated with that, and there's been a lot of controversy over it, and a lot of people within the animal rights movement expressing opposition to this for a number of reasons. And I think that, obviously the first objection would be kind of from a women's liberation perspective, I think, from a feminist perspective. And I think, and I think this kind of also raises the issue as to whether these protests where people go naked or semi-naked or whatever to try and raise awareness of what happens to other animals, whether those protests are actually of benefit or not. And I think you've got some stuff on that, haven't you, Roger?
Yeah. So this one is being described as a bikini protest.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's been quite a lot over the years, and a lot of it is from the Vegan Feminist Network. So that's our friend Dr. Corey Lee Wren, who was featured yesterday on the Animal Rights Show. And so they've looked at the research into this thing about sex cells, and also this issue of, does this help? And most of the research seems to suggest that it's not very useful. The group that is normally associated with this is PETA rather than, individuals. And they've suggested that they don't use sexism in their campaigns. They use sex, right? So there's that kind of idea. And of course, you've got the issue that they regard themselves as, media whores and this kind of stuff. That's Ingrid Newkirk's own words and stuff. And so it's kind of based on that all publicity is good publicity type stuff. But the research is suggested that this kind of thing doesn't really work. Overall, the bit that I've picked out there in, well, it's blue on my screen, but it's grey on yours. Overall, these findings are the first to demonstrate that sexualized images that dehumanize women reduce concern for ethical behavior in a domain unrelated to gender relations and sex. So I think we've seen a lot of things. Now, the one thing that I want to say as a sociologist is that I'm aware that Ronnie and I are two guys, and it's not our place to tell women what to do with their bodies. That's the first thing that we should say, right? My perspective comes from research, the kind of research here that Corey is alluding to, but also the kind of thing that second wave feminism would talk about. And it's really interesting in the sense that a lot of people will defend this kind of activity by saying that they find it empowering. Now, if that is the case, that an individual finds this kind of protests empowering, the problem with that from a second wave feminist point of view is that there are a lot of the kind of less powerful sisters who will be bearing the brunt of, the sexualization of women. And so if this furthers the idea that women are sex objects, it's not the empowered middle class woman who necessarily gets much kind of pushback from that. It'll be more likely people who are trafficked, people who are trafficked into the sex slavery kind of situation, where they don't have any autonomy. And so it's one thing to be personally empowered, and then you need to think about the structural effect of what you're doing. So I mean that's what I would say sociologically about it. I think, Ronnie, you just think tactically this is not great, right?
Well, I think it's speciesist. You see,
okay.
I mean, I've no doubt that the women involved in this and the people involved in the other protests where they go naked and stuff like that are genuine in wanting to end the oppression of other animals. Are genuine in feeling that what they're doing will, play a part in doing that. But I think there's a kind of deeper issue here, and I think we need to ask ourselves the question: say this weren't a beagle breeding facility. Say it were. Say it were a concentration camp for humans, right? I mean, can you imagine someone organising a demo outside Auschwitz, like G-strings against the gas chambers? You know, somebody, you know, a group of people.
You've been thinking of that all day, haven't you?
Yeah, I've been trying to think because it's like bikinis for the beagles. I thought let's try and find another rhyming phrase. Yeah, but say people were to have done that, or say people did do that, or say a migrant holding centre, you know, where, you know, there've been protests against those places, haven't they, because of the bad conditions and people being held for ages and ages and stuff like that. You know, say there was like a naked protest outside one of those places. What would that be acceptable? What would the feeling be about that? It wouldn't be. It kind of would be distasteful. It would be regarded as distasteful, wouldn't it?
Well,
In the
don't
same
you
way that
remember all
kind
the
of
streaking protests in the 70s? The streak. I mean, there was a song about it, wasn't there?
people did. Yes, I mean, you know, there was streaking that went on, and you could probably, you know, use the same type of argument with regard to that. But this type of kind of naked, you know, type protests would be regarded as distasteful and would be regarded as unacceptable if the victims in those places that the protests are against were human, would they not? And so to think that therefore those protests are okay if they're outside a place where animals are oppressed, or outside a business that's associated with the oppression of other animals, is in my opinion speciesist. And it's kind of similar to something we featured the other week, which was where people are outside slaughterhouses holding signs saying no hate to the slaughterhouse workers, and no hate to the drivers, you know, the drivers of the animals into the slaughterhouse. And I raised the same point there in saying that those particular signs are actually speciesist, because it wouldn't have been deemed acceptable. What everyone thinks about the slaughterhouse workers and the drivers, what everyone's personal feelings about those, it wouldn't have been deemed acceptable to kind of hold a placard outside a concentration camp saying no hatred to the camp guards, or no hatred to the drivers that are driving people in the death camps. That wouldn't have been.
Well, let me give you some pushback. First of all, you the analogy is wrong, because if the Nazi concentration camp soldiers didn't do their job, they'd get shot. But what we've got to imagine then, there's a society in which those human issues are as prevalent in their society as the animal ones are here. And so it's kind of from a very low baseline that you're trying to create awareness. Whereas you're not talking about a society which is, say, for example, already the majority anti-racist. If you had that kind of thing in the height of slavery, for example, would that make any difference, or would it still be seen as specious for you?
I think it's still the same, because what we need to be emphasizing all the time is that the oppression of other animals by humans is just as bad, and it's just as serious as the oppression of other humans by humans.
Yeah, and this trivializes it.
And these demos, like, although the people taking in carrying these things out have good intentions, I think they fail to see that does trivialize what is happening to the animals. And I mean, there are plenty of other ways of grabbing media attention, of creating public awareness without doing those what I'd regard as speciesist actions.
Yeah, well, I certainly agree with the trivialization thing, because it seems a bit weird. I do remember that there used to be a Peter Clone group in Ireland, and they once did this thing where, with a big plate, and they got a woman laid on the plate with virtually nothing on, and, a bit of, fake kind of tomato sauce on her and that kind of stuff. And I remember the comments in the social media afterwards, which was, well, if me eating a burger will get a naked woman out on the street in Grafton Street, and I'll eat two next week, kind of thing. And so much engagement with the issue, but you can't really judge it on that. It's one of those. Is there any possibility that the kind of titillation of the and the triviality of the event later, the people might then think about the issue later? You think there's a possibility? I'm just trying to be devil's advocate.
I mean, there may be a possibility of that, but I think there's a kind of, you know, deeper level to think of this, that you know, there is a saying that, you know, no publicity is bad publicity. I mean, I don't totally agree with that anyway, but you see, there are what we should be seeking to do, and it's kind of a bit similar to, you know, we had a discussion a while back about this offering of the £1 million to Rishi Sunak to go vegan, supposedly, and you know, the argument in favour of that was that, oh, it got publicity, it got the word vegan mentioned and all that, but there was a huge negative side to that as well, as we discussed, and you know what I said about that at the time, and what I'd say about these type of kind of naked protests, is that you aren't limited to doing that. You know, the people that kind of spent all that time, you know, thinking up the Rishi Sunak thing and devising it, all that, you know, they could have put that same amount of time, energy, and money into devising something that would have attracted the same amount of attention, but wouldn't have had the negative aspects to it. You know, and I feel it's the same with these kind of naked or semi-naked protests. That time, energy, and, you know, imagination could be put.
Yeah, that's what I always say. It shows a crushing lack of imagination.
Yes,
but
into devising something.
They will come back and say, yeah, but we know how the mass media work. We know how the tabloids work. They want this kind of thing. If you did a much more respectable or calmer or non-sensational thing, wouldn't get in.
Well, I think it depends. I think it depends. I think it depends what you do. I think it depends what you do, and I think that you kind of you have to always, you know, like, give thought to long-term effect of things as well, which brings me back to, you know, the consideration of these things being actually a trivialization of what happens to the animals and being speciesist. I think there's always ways of dreaming up schemes. All right, because you know, if this is going to be aimed at the Daily Star, which is like a kind of sort of rubbish newspaper anyway, you know, that it's kind of like totally aimed at titillation and totally aimed at, you know, people that don't really want to read anything intelligent anyway. And so, is there, you know, what is the real value of getting anything in a newspaper like that anyway? You know, well, I think it's much more valuable to get stuff in the more kind of serious.
Well, we're back to the fact that the mass media is very seductive for a social movement, and always has been, Ronnie. You know, that's a problem with it. And so, you know, a lot of people go, oh, you know, I remember when Animal Rising did the Grand National. Oh, you know, we got on the front page of this, and this. You know, as though that all counts as great kind of publicity type thing. So you've always got that judgment there. But going back to the lack of imagination thing, which is it's always my first point, kind of like, seriously, you can't think of anything else in the 21st century. I mean, somebody once made the point that even the car sellers don't drape their cars with semi-naked women anymore. And yet we seem to be the only movement that's still kind of as though we're back in the 1970s and think, how can we get attention? Oh, I know, get your tits out, right? And so you just think, is that all we've got? Is that really all we can come up with? It seems a little bit, well, just a bit sad that that's the only thing that we think is the thing to do.
I think it is a kind of, you know, is a sort of result of sort of like, you know, residual speciesism, because, like, you know, we've all been raised in species society, and it's kind of deeply ingrained, and so you know, this idea that that's not a sort of thing that would be done in terms of human issues doesn't occur to people, because, you know, the oppression of other animals is still felt to be somewhat different and perhaps somewhat lesser than the oppression of other humans.
Well, I think that's what Debbie's getting at here. When doesn't it all boil down to what you won't do morally, even though the rest of society says it's great? And so you could extrapolate that to the press. Even I mean, obviously, if you said to a journalist or a photojournalist, what's the best thing for me to do? They might go, well, this will be a great shot and guaranteed to get in. But whether you would do it or not morally is another thing, right? And so there's obviously a balance there. But what they're trying to do is they're really kind of trying to just play the game, aren't they? They know what the tabloids want. They're trying to give it to them.
Well, yes, or possibly encouraged to do that by the tabloids for a story. But once again, you wouldn't do people campaigning against, say people are concerned about conditions at a refugee centre, wouldn't do a naked demo outside the refugee centre to try and get an article in the Daily Star, would they? That would be unthinkable.
Well, if the situation was as bad as cultural speciesism, then maybe they would.
But it would still be, but kind of, they wouldn't, they wouldn't do that, and so neither should our movement do that, because what is being done to the other animals is every bit as serious as what happens to other humans that are oppressed by humans.
Yeah, I get that. I do get that indeed. Colleen has mentioned the Tash Peterson thing. We might get onto that. We've got it queued up, but there's a couple of issues before that, really. But yeah. I mean, my overall thing is from a kind of second wave feminist point of view. Think about the structural impact of your empowerment. So your empowerment is not an entirely personal thing. There are structural ramifications for it. And then the other part of it is that all we can come up with, which is always been a terrible disappointment to me, that you think, oh, wow, we haven't got the imagination to do something else apart from what's been done for years and years and years. And the research is even saying is not any good anyway. So it's all a bit weird to me.
Yeah.
Shall we move on? You think?
It's definitely made me consider cancelling my Mankini protest outside there anyway.
Oh, is it? Yeah. You're going to cover that bum up, at least there's that. So,
yeah, show me bum picture outside there. Yeah,
just hold that up. That'll clear the street, won't it?
Yeah, that would make them. They'd give up straight away if I did that.
No problem. I've got the fox hunting one lined up, but we can go to the other one if you want.
No, the fox hunting one's
that fine. Is fine and dandy, is it? Okay, add to stream. Okay. So we've got a situation here. Let me just clear my screen a little bit. So this is the Groeniad, I think. Yeah, the Guardian. And now this is weird, really, because this seems to be. I mean, it's a new article, but it seems to be the same kind of thing that's been going on for years, hasn't it? I mean, the National Trust had this problem. Yeah, so just to explain the situation, right? And so. When the hunt ban came in, and this is great timing for me because that was the thing, I did a recent time tunnel on this. When the hunt ban came in, one of the first things that the cops said was it's unworkable. And I'll tell you another thing, Ronnie, I don't know whether you saw that one, but the Welsh police, right, they had a really interesting thing in saying, if we stop illegal hunting and we impound the horses and the dogs, what do we do with them then? Right, which is kind of like an interesting point of view from the police point, just a practical kind of thing.
So if impounding the horses and dogs was like part of the process of
nicking the illegal hunters, that's what they were saying.
Yeah,
so if we nick these people, drag them off the horses, put them in the van, what do we do with the horses and the dogs?
Yeah. I kind of would have thought it would be one of these things where they go around and arrest them later, though, rather than just taking them off the horse.
Well, perhaps that was just their way of saying it can't be done. But that was one of the things that the police said as soon as the ban came in fact, even in the lead up to the ban, is that, and ban in bunny rabbit ears, folks, is that this is kind of not workable, and we don't have the money to do it, because policing is all about priority, and there are a lot more serious things going on in the city, rather than having loads and loads of officers on a Saturday running around, Essex or wherever, Cheshire. It's just kind of not workable. But then you've got this thing that this is the subject of this, which is this loophole, which is coming because of the trail hunts. So hunting never stopped, really, did it, Ronnie? It just got modified.
No, it never stopped. You see, the problem with the Hunting Act was, I think it was a bit of a fudge, because people have been, there's been a very big majority of the population opposed to fox hunting. I mean, the Hunting Act doesn't just cover fox hunting; it covers other forms of hunting with dogs. But fox hunting always seems to be the kind of main thing that's kind of brought up with regard to it, and probably the biggest area of hunting that it's meant to cover. That for decades and decades, there was a majority of the population opposed to hunting. There were several, private members' bills put before Parliament to ban it, and they all fell. None of them succeeded, until eventually, what was it, 20 years ago? Over 20 years ago, wasn't it? I think the ban came in. Does it say here?
It was 2005.
2005, yes, almost 20 years ago. The Labour government at the time decided, I think that they decided to support a private member's bill to ban hunting. But in actual fact, the Prime Minister at the time, Tony Blair, didn't personally support it, didn't really want time to be spent on it.
No, he got caught out on question time, didn't he?
Yeah. But the backbench MPs were absolutely insistent, his own MPs, a majority of his own MPs were actually insistent that it got passed. So it did get passed, but whether it was watered down in the process or whether it was always weak, I'm not really sure. But it is actually it is a kind of very weak piece of legislation, because what it actually allowed was that the infrastructure of hunting to remain. In other words, they were able to keep their stables, their kennels, their horses, their hounds, and what they were kind of meant to do, or what the law allowed them to do, was to switch to drag hunting, where the dogs would chase after a scent that was laid, by a person, kind of, running in front of them, obviously had previously been laid. And kind of that was the idea. So they're able to operate. They're able to go out in the countryside exactly the same. Everything was exactly the same, except instead of chasing a live animal, they were supposed to follow the scent. But the problem is with that, as it actually says in this article, is that it says hunts are frequently trailing in natural fox habitats, with hounds trained to locate and kill foxes. So-called terrier men are frequently present with shovels and terriers, while scent trails are often not present. I mean, see, basically the problem is that these trails are being, laid through the countryside, and these are dogs that are kind of are trained to hunt foxes, or it's in it's in their DNA. Centuries of breeding.
Yeah, Ronnie, what happened to this? One argument that I heard, which was supported by the SABs, because they actually even kind of volunteered to do this. I remember this because I was subbing in Essex at the time. They were talking about replacing foxhounds with bloodhounds, who wouldn't chase the fox, right? And then you would then send, as it were, a person. And then they said, well, that means that the person can stay away from other dangerous places. The hunt still wouldn't know where the hounds were going to take them, but they would know it was safe.
Yeah, I mean,
right.
that would certainly be safer for animals living in the wild. But you see, the current problem is because they're following this trail. If the hunt do Because if there's no police around or no one else is around, that the hunt don't even have to lay a trail. They'll just go out fox hunting in the normal way. I mean, who's going to know? And that's a big problem, because they're able to kind of go out anyway. They've still got their dogs, they've still got their horses. But if they're pursuing a trail through to the countryside and they come across the scent of a fox, they're going to go off and chase that fox. In fact, also what often happens as well, and which used to happen even before the Hunting Act came in, and they were actually going out openly pursuing foxes, was that if they saw a deer or smelt a deer, they'd go after the deer. Because I think originally it may be that foxhounds were dogs that pursued deer, so that's within them as well to chase after deer. So they'd swerve off from chasing the fox and chase after the deer and maybe kill the deer. You see, so whenever you've got a pack of dogs like that in the countryside, it puts animals living in the wild in danger. It puts them at risk. Even if there is a trail, and even if they're kind of genuinely trying to follow the trail, it's like that. It's just such a danger to have. It's just such a threat to other animals to have all those hounds, operating in the countryside. And really, what the Hunting Act should have done, it should have been pitched so that it caused the hunts to close down. There should have been none of this trail hunting, because the other aspect of it, and it's something that would probably apply to bloodhounds as well, is that they kill loads of foxhounds, because they're breeding the foxhounds every year, because the life of a dog, the hunting life of a dog isn't all that long. And I think when they get to like 6, 7, 8 years old, they start slowing down. They're no longer, regarded as suitable for hunting, and they're killed. They're very often shot through the head and killed. And there's been some reports of that they're then fed back to the other hounds.
Yeah, they end up being feed for the other ones.
Yeah. You see, so you've got that, and then the young hounds that are coming in to replace the older ones that they've killed. There's a lot of them not suitable for hunting. They've got to be dogs that are kind of willing to obey the commands that that the huntsman gives them, and also that will fit in with the rest of the pack. And not all of the young dogs do that, or are able to do that, and they get killed as well. So you've got this killing of the young hounds, you've got killing of the ones that get a bit older. So there's mass slaughter, and it's several thousand of them. At one time it's 5,000, I think, a year. There was some research done. It might be a little bit less now, because I think hunting has slightly diminished over the years. But it would still be in the thousands of these dogs are being killed. And you get that with trail hunting as well. Even if they were doing genuine trail hunting and they were doing their best not to pursue.
Not to mention the injuries to the horses, Ronnie.
There's injuries to horses as well, because they're jumping over fences and going through rough places. And then what happens to the horses when they're no longer, when they're no longer fit enough to take part in that? What happens to them? Well, we can imagine, can't we?
Well, we already know. I think they'll probably end up being eaten by the other hounds as well. So
the problem with the sub suggestion regarding bloodhounds is that would probably happen to the bloodhounds too. That there'd be this killing of the bloodhounds in the same way. And so all of it just needs all to be totally.
Yeah, but the thing is, Ronnie, this leads me to the question that I want to ask you, because obviously the bloodhounds would have been killed, and if they weren't good enough in the first place, they would have been killed, and all the rest of it. But that's because animal rights wasn't part of the hunting debate. And so going back to the fact that you're saying, well, the law wasn't very good. Well, no, but the law came in through a speciesist system. So if we've said this before, if we could go back in time, I spent lots of hours on the hunting ban. I did quite a few TV things, did quite a few radio things. You'll have done the same. we kind of wasted our time when we could have been doing vegan stuff, right?
Yeah, I kind of feel that in general. I think, you know, the solution to all these things fundamentally really is vegan education, because, you know, all these things are rights and speciesism, whether it's hunting, whether it's animal experimentation, you know, whether it's animals in zoos and circuses, whether it's animal racing, you know, the consumption of animal products, all these things are rights and speciesism. And so, you know, so the fundamental thing that we need to do, and need to do, you know, much more, is vegan education. So to educate people to become anti-speciesist, and if we can do enough of that, we get rid of all those things. And that's the thing. And like, we're kind of, we're not tackling the fundamentals sufficiently. You know, the fundamental reason why these things are.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's push back on both of us now then, because we are saying, well, look, we're not tackling the fundamentals. What you've got now is you've got a law that bans something that a lot of people still want to do. So that's not ideal. And we've seen then it's going to take years and years and years, because people will find every loophole that they possibly can. Okay, so we know that. But if the argument that I've heard from within the movement is that, okay, well, you want more fundamental change than even those kind of bans. Those bans have taken years. So your fundamental change, you're talking about centuries away. So we've got to do what we can right now.
You see, I think that's only the case if people don't do it. You know, what we need is a huge effort with vegan education. You know,
all together, folks. You know what's coming.
Yeah. Because that's and that's the thing, and that's never happened. That's kind of not been done. The amount of vegan education we have at the moment is tiny compared with the potential that it could reach. You know, to the heights it could reach by encouraging enough people to get involved in it. And all the time, you see, it's kind of all these things like hunting and animal experimentation, stuff like that. They're all symptoms of a deeper problem. They're all symptoms of speciesism. And basically, what people are trying to do is treat the symptoms rather than try to cure the disease. And that's okay in a way, you know, like sometimes when we're not very well, like we need to treat the symptoms. You know, we might have an ache or pain that's caused by something else. We'll take pain relief. That's treating the symptoms. You know, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But at the end of the day, if we want to kill the disease, we've got to operate at a deeper level. And I'm, you know, I'm not opposed to people hunt sabbing. I think that's a very worthy thing to do. You know, I've raised, you know, hundreds and not thousands of pounds for hunt sabs, you know, in recent years. It's the same with animal sanctuaries. You know, we both raised, you know, lots of money for them. But at the end of the day, you know, those things don't solve the problem. Those things are dealing with the symptoms of the problem. Unless enough people actually tackle the problem, that problem's never going to be solved. And so we're going to be dealing with the symptoms of that fundamental problem forever.
Yeah, well, I can see that, but because it's kind of goes back to the fact that, you know, if society is deeply speciesist, the idea that we're going to get anything from the legal system that means anything is just out of the question, really. You know, so it's just a waste of time.
You're going to get crumbs from the table. You're going to get crumbs from the table because if you think about, okay, you know, the hunting hack may have had, I think, has had some effect in sparing some animals. I mean, the main thing that that the hunting act has had an effect on is organised hare coursing, like the Waterloo Cup. I mean, I think we probably were both involved in trying to sabotage the big Waterloo Cup hare coursing.
One of the most dangerous things you could do.
One of the most dangerous things. There's a famous picture of me surrounded by police when I actually had hair in the 70s.
You had a hair in your hand or on your head?
No, on the head. Yeah, and
right.
we were all, there were so many of us arrested. They actually put us in a horse box to take us to the police station, and we ended up being done for breach of the peace. And you know, the organised hare coursing, that that no longer takes place because they just couldn't do it. It'd just be too obvious a thing to do. Now a lot of the hare courses now go over to Ireland, where it's still lawful, and the ones from this country. So it's kind of not as the act, I think, hasn't been so successful against that as people might think. But I think it could be argued, some hares have probably been spared by that. But that's a tiny number of animals in relation to all the animals, that are oppressed, all the animals that suffer, all the animals that are slaughtered, because of human activity. I mean, it's in this country, it's something like, I think it's something like 250 a second are killed just to feed people in this country. 250 a second. And so it's just these things. All we've got is tiny crumbs from the table. We've got tiny crumbs from the table, like like the kind of largely ineffective hunt ban. We've had the ban on fur farming, right? But fur is still it's still lawful for fur to be imported and sold. Yeah, there's been a big reduction in the fur trade. It could be argued, yes, some animals have been spared by that. I wouldn't dispute that. What else? We've got a ban on some animals in circuses, haven't we? I think.
Exotics.
What they call wild animals in circuses. Although dogs, they're still allowed to have performing dogs and stuff. But we're talking about, and yeah, that we can see, people say, oh, yeah, we've made progress, but that's tiny. That's tiny compared with the vast edifice of animals that are oppressed. And we've got a kind of, how long are we just going to be, trying to get crumbs from the table? We want the whole dinner. Do you know what I mean? We need to go.
Well, we've always had problems with crumbs from the table because we're dealing with a system which is speciesist, including the legal system. And I showed you this document before we came on air because I was looking through some old things for a time tunnel coming up. In fact, we've got a special coming up next week, folks. This is called Violence in Animal Rights, but it goes through a lot of times when the police have had to give compensation to people for false arrest and everything. But going back to this one, just in terms of what you just said, 1980, supporters of the Enfield Chase foxhounds, George Adair, convicted of criminal damage to a sabotaged vehicle and ordered to pay £100 fine and £60 costs. On the charge of assault, the jury was unable to reach the decision, so Judge Hickman decided for them, finding Adair not guilty despite the evidence of 6 SAB witnesses, a detective constable, a sergeant, an inspector, and a superintendent regarding his alleged violent behaviour. To cap it all, the judge ordered all the SABs to return the next week, which is an expensive thing to do, of course, send them away and then bring them back, where he bound them over to keep the peace for a year, refusing them permission to offer any defence. Judge Hickman, the judge in case, refused to comment on the nature of his own recreational pursuits, because in the 1980s, this happened to us all the time, that we used to get a magistrate hunting, the SABs get nicked, and then you're in front of the magistrate the following day.
Absolutely. I mean, there were 2 women, I think that this may have been in the 70s, 2 women were jailed because they were involved in court cases where they'd been attacked by the hunt, or their vehicles had been attacked by the hunts, and people from the hunt were on trial and convicted in both cases. But then the magistrates wanted to bind the women over. These were 2 separate cases, and they refused to be bound over, and they were both sent to prison. One was sent to prison for a month, and the other one was sent to prison for a week. And so they were the ones that were the victims, yet they ended up with a greater punishment than the hunt guys who were just. And
you'd get this action likely to cause a breach of the peace.
Yeah, that's right. They want, you don't have to be convicted of anything. The magistrate can just decide, you've done action likely to cause breach of the peace. I'm going to bind you over to keep the peace. And what that means is that they bind you over in the sum of, say, you're bound over for 2 years for the sum of £50 to keep the peace. And that means that within those 2 years, if you're found to have breached the peace, you have to pay the £50.
Yeah, you forfeit.
That's what it is. But you
you're
can
fine,
refuse
yeah.
to be bound over. But if you refuse to be bound over, you can end up being sent to prison with.
Well, because that's contempt of court, isn't it?
Well, it's kind of similar. It's kind of similar to that. Yeah, that's what I don't know whether they do the same now. That's what they used to do then. Interesting because the Enfield Chase, the Enfield Chase, the hunt master of the Enfield Chase at the time, because I was involved in subbing them in the, well, certainly in the late 1970s, with the North London hunt subgroup that I was involved in running. And they were like our nearest hunt. And the master of the Enfield Chase was a guy called Raymond Brooks Ward, who was a famous, a well-known commentator on show jumping on television. And he formed a group of hunt thugs called the Hunt Protection Society. And their job was to hunt the sabs. So when we went out sabbing, we weren't just up against the hunt. We had these hunt protection thugs trying to stop us. And there was one hunt where they threw, luckily for some reason I didn't go on that particular one, but they grabbed a load of the sabs and threw them in the nettles and stuff like that. So the following week when I did go out, one of the guys that was running our group, he had some mates that were in the local karate club. They were all karate black belts and stuff. So he got them to come on the hunt, you see. And so we pulled up at the hunt, and all these hunt thugs came running down the road, the Hunt Retribution Society. They pulled open the door of the first car, and the first thing that came out was a boot that kicked one of them in the head. And these karate guys got out, and they were all like kicking and chopping them and everything. It was absolutely brilliant. And all these hunt thugs ran away. And they were never the same again after that. They kind of left us alone, because I don't think they knew that they never knew whether the karate guys would be there or not. So this guy that was involved in that may well have been one of this hunt protection squad people.
Yeah, the Retribution Squad was on our side, Ronnie.
The Hunt Retribution Squad was our side. Yeah, yes.
Allegedly, but, yeah, okay. So,
but I mean, the short of it is, yes, I would like to see a stronger law against hunting that kind of put them totally out of existence. No drone hunting, none of that. No, I mean that would be a step in the right direction. But we have to. But really, we have to go to a more fundamental level than that. And the key is that we need far more vegans involved in outreach.
Do you agree with this though? That every step counts. I mean, I'm not opposed to. Yeah, I mean, I would support a proper ban on hunting. Yeah, it would be. Yeah, animals would be spared by that. It would be what you might call a progressive step. But like, if we really want to, but nevertheless, the number of animals that we spared by that is still would be relatively small compared with the total number that are kind of, I think you explained that, didn't you?
I explained that already. Yes. So I think we kind of need, it's the most important thing we need is far more vegans to be involved in outreach, so that we tackle the problem of speciesism at the fundamental level, and
going back to this idea of action likely to cause breach of the peace, I used to say to the cops at the hunts, I would say, look, most people, according to opinion polls, oppose fox hunting. And so surely the action likely to cause breach of the peace is the hunts going out in the first place, not the SABs coming to stop them.
Yeah. But you see, I think this is the thing. The interesting thing is what that shows. With all the opinion polls and everything, it shows that public opinion is not enough. Public opinion is not enough, despite the vast majority of people being opposed to hunting for decades and decades and decades.
And massive numbers when it came to hare coursing. I mean, they're in the 90s, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was in the 90s. There was like huge opposition, and opposition to fox hunting was always in the 70s, and I think in the high 70s. And yet these things continue. And the reason why these things continue is because there isn't the political will to end them. Although the public are against them, there isn't the will in Parliament to end them. And that's another argument for vegan education, because how are we going to get the politicians into Parliament that will properly put an end to those things? You know, we need to get more vegans. We need to get more animal liberationists selected, people that believe in it. And how are we going to get that? We're only going to get that by creating more vegans, because by creating more vegans, we get more vegan politicians, we get more vegans to vote for them. And so that's the only way that we are ever going to get any decent legislation to end all this like violation of the rights of other animals and you know, the oppression of other animals. So once again, you know, vegan education is a really important aspect of that.
Right. Well, we've gone over the hour. Do you want to? We'll do one more. So do you?
Yeah,
want to
we'll
do
do our third one, because
sheep,
this is
or do you want to go for the protest one?
No, I think I do the New Zealand one, because this is something different and it's also interesting, and it's another country.
Okay, so this is it. So this is the Groniad again. Yeah, this is the Groniad. Okay, so
yeah, this Guardian. This is what's happening in New Zealand. Is that they're on a lot of sheep farms, they're planting pine instead, and they're planting pine for the forestry industry, because there's more money to be made from it. And so a lot of the sheep farms are going over to, you know, pine forestry, right? And obviously there's a lot of ways in which that's really good, because for two reasons. First of all, it gets rid of the sheep farming, but secondly, because it's better for the climate. You know, these trees are going to pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, and one of the reasons it's being done is so that New Zealand can reach its kind of climate targets, or try to reach its climate targets. And so this seems to be the way that things are going there. But there is a kind of there is a sort of negative aspect to it, and that is that the pine trees that are being planted they're not native to they're not native
so
to New
it's
Zealand.
more like forestry rather than
and it's forestry. It's a
Yeah.
cash crop, you
Yeah.
see. And they're not native to New Zealand, and there's something in
Well,
here.
presumably we would go for that rather than. I mean, obviously the best thing to do is just rewild, right? But I suppose this would be an alternative, would it? And if you go back to someone like Kathleen Janaway, who talks about a tree-based economy, that would involve forestry, wouldn't it? Rather than just
Well, yeah, you see, that's right. But you see, I think that the problem often with forestry is kind of what happens is, first of all, the trees that are planted aren't native trees. They tend to plant pine because they're fast growing, and you know that there's more money to be earned from them. When really in a lot of these places you should have deciduous trees, and you should have trees that are I mean, obviously pine is native to some areas, but in a lot of areas it's just the
Deb says
deciduous
that they're
trees.
water intensive. Is that right? Do you know?
I think I kind of think they are, and so basically, I mean, as it kind of says in this, it says, for environmentalists, the benefits of carbon absorbing forests are tempered by concerns about expanding monocultures of radiata pine. It's an introduced fast growing species that can wreak havoc on native ecosystems and cause catastrophic downstream effects when harvested. Because what they tend to do is they kind of clear, they fell these trees en masse, that leaves a big empty area, and then when you get rainfall, there aren't any trees to hold back the water, and that's why you get the problems downstream with flooding and stuff like that.
Yeah, but that is the usual profit before justice instead of justice before profit. I mean, if they did it in a different way, for example, taking out selective trees and leaving others, it's going to make it a lot easier than just kind of zoom through them, right? A lot harder. But so what?
Yeah, and so although in many ways this is a good thing, there are some. It's not as good as it could be if those areas were just allowed to go back to what they naturally would be.
Or a bit of both, maybe.
Well, I think the thing is, even with I think you can have a bit of both, but I think we have to have forests, really, wherever they are in the world, they're very largely kind of native trees. To be honest, for the benefit.
But Ronnie,
of
you've got to
the
see this as an overall good thing, surely.
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, what I'm saying, yes. So overall, it's a good thing, but it's something that could be.
But it's a plan that needs modification.
Yeah. And and so it's great that that's kind of that's kind of happening. But you see, the other question to ask is that if it's not, this isn't accompanied by a reduction in the consumption of animal products, then it's not, overall, it's of no benefit to the other animals, because, okay, so that, there's a reduction in the number of sheep, being farmed in New Zealand. But if people are still consuming the same amount of animal products, then other animals are going to be farmed and killed elsewhere to supply that demand.
Yeah, well, of course, you're always going to get that. But one thing that the story does talk about is this bit that I've highlighted here in the yellow for you, is the fact that it shows that one vegan strategy for the future is to do with subsidies, because these people are not doing it out of the kindness of their heart. They're doing it because they earn carbon credits, right? And so that must be translated into money.
Yeah, and of course, there is a problem with. I mean, we have a problem in this country where animal farming is subsidised. You see, so so it's really important to end those subsidies, and instead to have those subsidies transferred to encouraging people to switch to organic agriculture, or to allow their land to be rewilded or whatever. But how do we create a situation where we get those subsidies? We have to have a government that's willing to encourage that transition. Our present government seems not at all willing to do that. They seem to be, hand in hand and in cahoots with the animal farmers. So once again, we're down to the nature of politicians, and we're down, if we're ever going to end the subsidies, we're going to have to change. We're going to have to change the politicians.
It's funny how it always comes back to the same thing.
It always comes back to the same thing, because once again, you've got to get politicians in there that are saying, right, I want to see an end to animal agriculture. I want to change the subsidies so that they encourage, we're moving towards this, like, as animal rises, say, a plant-based.
Whatever you want to think about this forestry issue, the hunting thing, crop deaths, whatever it is, it's always the same answer, right?
It's always the same answer, yeah. That kind of whatever people are doing, and I know that I think anything that anyone does to, in terms of trying to prevent the oppression of other animals, trying to prevent the slaughter and suffer and all that. Anything that anyone does in that respect, I think is positive and is praiseworthy. Whether it's people with hunts having, whether it's people running an animal sanctuary, or it's people campaigning against animal experimentation, or animals in zoos, animal racing. All this is these are all positive things. But the really important word that I'm more saying is unless we get sufficient vegan education, we're never going to get very far at all. We're never going to fundamentally change things. We're never going to get animal liberation, and never going to get the society we want. And so that needs to be, we need to have a lot more people involved in that. And that's the fundamental solution to all of these things.
Yes, indeed. I was interviewed by Seb Alex the other day. I'm not quite sure when it's coming out, but it's going to come out eventually. I'm just trying to find some. Oh, I found it now. But he asked me this question. See if you would answer it the same. I actually said I think Ronnie Lee would say the same as this. What he asked me was, thinking back in all the years you've been doing stuff, would you just do it all again, or would you change things? And I said, well, I would we would start vegan education much earlier, if only to the extent of incorporating vegan education into the explanation of what we were doing at the time. So if we were still part of the ALF press office, we would be bringing in vegan education. And I explained that thing that you always explained, that we didn't really engage the public. The public didn't really count in those days and that kind of stuff, right? And so I said that would be the big change for me. Would you have said the same, Ronnie?
Yeah, it'd be the big it'd be the big change for me as well. I mean, I think that had we kind of started like grassroots on the street type vegan education way back in the 70s, similar to kind of the type of community education I advocate now, where you're kind of holding stalls at different events, you've got a presence in the street and stuff like that. Had we kind of started that way back in the 70s, I think we'd be a lot further on now. I mean, it would be much harder then because, of course, it was harder to kind of operate socially as a vegan then, I suppose, in terms of like being able to eat out, being able to get, it was even quite hard to get bread in those days that was suitable for vegans, but nevertheless, vegans, people did become vegan in those days, and they became vegan, in the same way as I did, because they received information. And the Vegan Society had a television program, didn't they? That they made a TV program.
It's a classic of professionalism and
a classic of yeah. But and now when you look at it, it kind of it's kind of humorous, because it was of its time, wasn't it? People speaking all very properly and everything.
Okay, people in the chat, who is your favourite family from the 1976 Vegan Society thing? Because everybody's got their own favourite, and it's always the same. But I want to also, while we're waiting for people to say that, Deb has said this, right? We need to pressure politicians. Now, your position is kind of yes about this, but with a bit of a difference. So if you look at this one, for example, this is what Kathleen Janaway said. Said the politicians will go on until they're frightened of losing the votes, which is what Deb is getting at. And the industrialists, as she put it, will go on until they won't sell their goods, which is obviously the kind of supply and demand thing. But your difference, I suppose, Ronnie, is that you want vegans in the system, not just pressurizing it, right?
The thing is, you see, I think that kind of, I think the problem with politicians, and to give an example of our existing government here, is that they're tied to a certain ideology, and they'll be tied to that.
Problems with politicians, Ronnie?
Yeah, no, they're all wonderful. Yeah, they're tied to an ideology. And so, they will stick to that ideology, even though they may lose votes by doing so. And I think that's the problem you've got. It's not as simple as kind of them losing votes.
It's not as simple as that, though, Ronnie, because they will then pressure the executive, because they're saying, well, if we carry on with this, I'm going to be out of my seat, and are you going to give me another one? Well, we don't have another one, so they'll lose support. The executive would lose support from the rank and file of the politicians too, right? So it's a two-way street in that sense.
Yeah,
surely.
yeah, and so I think really the key is we have to replace those politicians, because they're wedded to a certain ideology, and we need politicians who have a completely different fundamental philosophical belief. And that's why we need, the only way we're going to do it is by having loads more vegans in politics. You're not going to kind of, I think you can pressurize politicians to a certain extent, but then you come up against a brick wall of their fundamental ideology, and you can't move them any further. And I think this is kind of what's happened with this government. If you look at all the kind of protests to do with the climate crisis, Extinction Rebellion to stop oil and all that, that kind of the action of the government hasn't been to do anything meaningful to combat the climate crisis. The reaction of the government is to bring in, ever more draconian laws against protest. That's what's happened as a result of that, because you're dealing with people that are wedded, hard fast to a certain ideology, and so you have to replace the politicians. and the way and once again, fundamentally, the way to do that and get the right sort of politicians is through vegan education.
What about Deb's point in this sense, that once you start getting vegan politicians, they're going to be pressured by the speciesists, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. But you see, by the same token, they're not going to yield to that pressure any more than the existing ones will yield to our pressure, because those vegan politicians will have a very, deeply held philosophy themselves that they're not going to go against. You see, so that's not going to happen, and so that's the situation we need to create. And I think kind of, really what we've kind of learned from the climate protests in this country is that kind of, that type of pressure campaigning isn't working, really isn't working. And so, we have to kind of focus very much more on education as the key to fundamentally changing things.
All right, Terry's provided you with a script here.
Oh, I've never seen that before. Terry's watched so many of our programs. He's learned that off by heart.
Well, I imagine everybody in the chat knows that.
Yeah, Terry said it. It's on the screen. But yeah, it's absolutely Terry's absolutely right.
So you don't have to say it now, Ronnie.
But it's like a really, really, really important. And the thing is that that we have to change things at a fundamental level. We see all the time, very, very frequently, people in our movement and even us in the past, we kind of have aimed somewhere else other than the fundamental level in trying to get change. And like I said, going back in the time, I'd get the vegan society to set up local groups, to get those people out on the street, to get them in community, and yeah, change would be slow at first, but then it would gradually escalate as it has.
Just do this, people. Just do this.
Yeah, because it started earlier, because we started all that earlier, we'd be much further along the road.
Yeah, when we talk about a long time earlier, aren't we? We talk about
we're talking about 25. We're talking about 25 years earlier than actually kind of did start.
You get a bit of pushback here from Canada, Ronnie. Seems to me that fewer and fewer politicians are wedded to ideology and more wedded to whatever works to keep them in power.
Well, I certainly, my experience of this country is that's kind of not the case. That they can kind of be pressurized if there's a huge amount of pressure. They can kind of be pressurized on small things, like for instance, this our government had a plan a few years ago to sell off nationally owned forests to private enterprise, which would have meant that those forests would have been even more exploited and be even worse for the animals that inhabit them than is the case. The situation now where they're kind of publicly owned, and there was so much public pressure against that they dropped the proposal. So pressure can work in small areas, but if the pressure means that they've kind of fundamentally got to change their basic ideology, then I mean an example of that is like we've got the badger cull in over here, where basically licenses have been issued every year. It's gone on for 10 years for badgers to be killed under the pretext that they cause TB in cows. And there's massive scientific evidence that isn't the case, and that killing the badgers does more harm than good and all that kind of thing. But the government steadfastly sticks to that policy despite all the pressure that's been brought on them, because first of all, they want the votes of the farmers, and loads of farmers just want to kill anything that they can't make money out of. And secondly, because
they kill them as well, so they're killing everyone.
Yes, absolutely, and also because property developers want to build on land, and if there's badgers on land, it holds up the development. And of course, a lot of these property developments are like developers are the pals of the people in government, or the government people are involved in that as well. You see, and so despite the scientific evidence, despite the massive pressure against, because like the vast majority of people are against the badger cull, but it's made no difference to the government, you see, because they've got their own interests that are kind of stronger than the pressure that's brought. So really, I think through pressurizing politicians. I think you only get them to move a little bit, but we don't want small moves. We want like a huge like revolutionary change, don't we? And you're not going to get that from the existing politicians.
No, I would say that is a given, I would think. And another given is that we're approaching 90 minutes. So this might be a good moment, Ronnie. I don't know if are you sated? Have you said everything you want?
I think I probably. Are there any other comments in the chat?
No, I've been monitoring that as I do without being paid to do so.
Yeah.
So
but, we'll be back. I mean, I think our show we've kind of already decided what we're gonna, because we're back to the new shows every 2 weeks, and so next week we're back to our normal.
No, but it's a special next week. Don't forget.
It's our it's a kind of special. It's not a news show, but it's a special show, isn't it, Roger? That you can tell everyone about now.
Yeah, so it's a still alive and vegan time tunnel special, in the sense that we're coming up to the anniversary, and it will be a day after the anniversary of a leading prime mover in the movement in the 1990s called Neil Lee. And he was very kind of influential in lots of things. Ran a magazine called Art News for ages, started lots of campaigns. He died early, unfortunately, because he had spina bifida. He campaigned through intense pain as well. So he was a remarkable kind of guy. I used to do kind of work for him, in the sense that he would send me books to review and that kind of stuff, and then be on the phone 2 days later and said, "Where's the review?" And you go, "I just received it, Neil. What's the matter with you?"
Yeah.
So he was. I said he was creatively pushy, I think was I called him. But he was a great guy, and it was great. It was sorry to lose him, of course, and so it'll be a joint thing about the life and times and the work of Neil Lee. He started Vegan Buddies, which was a great idea at the time. He also started vegan food fairs, Ronnie, where people started, showing people, plant-based foods and everything. And of course, in those days, it was much more unusual to even see them in those days. So it was kind of, this is what to look for when you go in the supermarket, that type of thing,
Yeah, that's right. And he had a website devoted to,
Real Foods, was it? Real Foods, I think.
Well, it's about what food was suitable for vegans, because it kind of wasn't so easy to find stuff in those days. So
it's like a database, wasn't it?
It's kind of database. Yeah, I mean, he did loads, and one of the most important things that he did was to set up an organization, which was more a federation, called the Animal Rights Coalition, which was very important at the time. And I think we'll be kind of talking about how we kind of need these days to bring back something like that.
We will be talking about that next Tuesday, and we'll be incorporating the time tunnel as well. On the proviso, of course, Ronnie, we'll be doing all that if
we are both still alive.